Okay, so hi everybody. I mean, we're just going to pick up from the start of the where we ended last time, and we're really looking at this fairy tale both from the feminine aspect and the masculine aspect. You know, every fairy tale you could say, well, the uh, feminine is the anima, or you can say the feminine is the heroine. And if she's the heroine, then the thank you, Lena. If she's the heroine, then the masculine is the animus. You know, and I want to say one other thing too, that this has come up a lot, is that in there's literal gender, and then there is the polarities of the opposites. And in every one of us, there are the polarity of the opposites. Whether you're accidentally born a man, you're accidentally born a woman, you have the opposites within you, and you might be a little more conscious of one opposite than you are of the other, but you have them both in you at the same level. And in the literal accidental male, the aspect in him that is most unconscious is feminine energy. So it behooves him to know about feminine energy. And if you listen to Marion Woodman, the one who was born female has been somewhat lamed by living in a world of logos and intellect, where we measure each other's worth by thinking, IQ, and so the feminine aspect in us is in women is undernourished, and she felt that all her life. I mean, most of her books were about azine, about bringing the feminine to living the feminine consciously, because she felt she never did it until she became in her very mature years. So anyway, this fairy tale is particularly poignant too, and that means sadly beautiful. You know, there's a lot in it that will awaken pathos in us, but that's that the wounds are the way to healing. And it's a story about healing. So anyway, this the daughter is basically, in this tale, sold to the devil, either consciously or unconsciously. Now the man thought he was giving up not much. I'm just going to cut down the great tree, the great apple tree in my backyard. And when we start to read Robert Johnson, the fairy tale was slightly different. That the miller had to grind his grain by pushing it around, and the devil offered him the water wheel. That almost makes more sense, to do it without any work at all. And he says, all you have to give me is what's behind your mill. So all he has to give him is that aspect of nature within him for this new technology. Cut down your apple tree, give it to me. But actually, in the backyard was his daughter, not just his daughter, but the feminine living life force within him, the aspect of renewal. So he has to give up the aspect of renewal inside himself. His soul, really, he's giving up his soul for this technology. Now, what laws of life is he ignored? It looks like the intellectual qualities of the human mind have worn out. Now, this is going to be very important. Is consciousness always wears out. The conscious attitude is not the totality of the psyche, and it tends to start doing things by rote. It starts to cheat, and so it gets away from the living source, becomes a habit, a mechanical technological persona trick, So consciousness turns into a machine, so consciousness kind of turns into a machine. Now, this is the malady of the overuse of extroverted feeling, that everything is surface oriented. Everything it has to do with the daily. There's nothing else about life other than its surfaces. So anywhere, and mental activity is particularly powerful in our day and age. Yet it is the farthest from nature. I mean, directed thinking does not happen in nature. In nature, the type of thinking that we have is more like the one that you'll encounter in dreams. It's metaphorical. It's um, something runs like a deer. It has deer qualities. That's the thinking of the in nature that we have. Now, this man, instead of forcing poverty where he could possibly discover the apple trees in his backyard, he wishes to continue in the old way, so he sells the soul of the renewing life force, the anima, to really the devil is consciousness, to the conscious attitude, to the one of acquisition, of greed, of acquiring things in the outer world. And this we find a lot that it is it's like alcoholism. Is it really that you want a drink? No, you don't want a drink. You want to be closer to the spirit, and yet you want the cheap way to do it. And so then you get what you lose is the possibilities of life. There are other possibilities of life, and they're lost to us. Okay, you might be successful in business or science, but you have no heart, and you neglect the feeling side. And a daughter who has such a father has never been nourished by his eros function. Such a woman is sold to the devil almost all the time. It means that she has not been has been nourished by the destructive, devilish, intellectual side. And this is Marion Woodman says this was her upbringing, and she'll be either very ambitious or very cold. And Marion Woodman, I'll tell you, she was both. Now, that she does the same thing of her father, continues in his pattern, and in this calculated, cold, animus way. And now the girl in the story, and by the way, hi, I can't read very well. It's Majella. Welcome. If you want to put your email in the chat, we can send you the PDFs of whatever book we're reading. We're just doing, I think it's going to take at least 3 sessions on this fairy tale. This is the second one. First one, we just pretty much read the tale. Okay, now she just describes an actual case. Now, this is an actual case of a woman who has her hands cut off. Okay, it's a real story of this one that we encounter in the fairy tale. Her father was cold as ice, had no married life, no love for his children, no human relationship. The eros had completely degenerated, no energy of the related aspect. Eros is relatedness. After coming together, bringing things together. And after he dies, his daughter takes up mental pursuits in college, art and philosophy. But anytime she touched any machinery, she always became manic. But so instead, however, she reads books like mad, like she's crazy. She plays the piano like she's crazy. So she herself is becoming a machine. She doesn't like machinery, but so she becomes a machine herself. So she's possessed by the devil. The devil, remember too, is what the devil really is is that aspect of us in the modern age that has cut itself off from the source. It has cut itself off from the source. Now, you can say the source is really nature. In the Bible, it's called God, but it's really is that feminine mother who created our bodies. That's what we're cutting ourselves off. In my active imagination, the final river I go over, I come on to the surface of the earth before there was any life on it. And that's where the Great Mother lives. She lives in this earth before life. That's where I meet her. Now, she was sensitive to all of this, and she realized that this was destructive and the devil had got her. So she gave up art and philosophy and she tried to play the piano. But she fell in love with her sadistic music teacher who was forcing her to practice day and night as he pushed her on. And so through all these manic pursuits, trying to escape the devil, this source, this fact that she was not brought up and nourished by the Eros side, she lost all her friends and relationships. She finally woke up to what was happening and she realized the possession. She dropped it all and was not in the end able to do anything. Whatever she did was always done in a destructive, animus way, poisonous way. And the animus in its negative aspect and the mother in her negative aspect is poisonous. She became completely passive, feminine personality. So she had the choice of either keeping her hands and being this and participating in being possessed by the animus, or she could refrain from all activity, lose her hands, and then that was her way of freeing herself from the animus. So she became like someone sitting in a tree with a monster below. She just sat up there, and von Franz, when you see someone up there sitting in a tree like that, it's often because the other possibilities too devilish, can't come down. So the girl in our story also decided to keep clear of the devil. Hi, Jan. Just you came in right at the beginning. Now she sacrificed, the girl in the story sacrifices her participation in life, her hands, rather than fall into his hands. So what does she lose? She loses the feeling function. Now the father animus, or the miller, must have at some time in his life betrayed his unconsciousness as well in order to obtain success, the water wheel, or get out of some difficulty cheaply, thereby selling his anima, his soul, his eros, or the unconscious side, to that organizing aspect of life that has no connection with nature, and it's just when you say false god, it really means it has no connection to the source. It's a dead end, the daughter is under the shadow of his problem, so she has to suffer because now all of these figures really end up being in us. Every single one of these figures are also in us too. One person will encounter all of this in our lives. Now she has to suffer because the masculine aspect, you can say, or the paternal aspect, didn't address his problem decently. He avoided the conflict by ignoring the emotional life, the feeling life, the soul life. So, and now from the woman's standpoint, she is threatened by a terrible animus, this aspect within her that tells her she can't do anything, that is cutting her off from her source. Now, the idea of there's two forms of animus. One is the lowest form, which is opinion. You'll never do anything. You're never going to amount to anything. Don't even start. And also makes you very opinionated about things and gets you poisons the atmosphere around you with opinions. That's the lower form of animus. The higher form of animus is the one that takes the symbols of dream that we get from the unconscious and adds the level of meaning to them to create the third philosopher's stone. That's the role of the positive animus. Provide a transcendent meaning to unconscious context so that it can produce its child. And its child is the symbol of the philosopher's stone. Now that's what the animus should be doing. But it can't do it in a woman who is who's been dragged down by the negative animus or the negative mother into just a hell. We need to, both the man or the woman need to free themselves from the negative father or mother so that they don't have us by the throat anymore. So now we can communicate with the source on a free and independent collaborative level. And that's what really life is asking for us. That's going to come up in a second when we're talking about instincts. And now, she has to as soon as she touches anything on the mental side, she falls into animus possession or to a power drive. It's another bad aspect of the animus, and becomes as cold and ruthless and brutal as her father's was. So all she can do to keep out is to keep out of life. That's how she escapes this, passivity. Now, that's what the girl in the story does. She bathed herself in tears, and that protected her from this negative animus, because she has immersed herself in the feeling function, and he can't deal with it because he's the opposite of the feeling function, the thinking function. He's logos. Now the devil has since she doesn't, the chopping off the hands means the devil can't use them, really. So now, thus mutilated and unable to take up any activity, she's the only way that she could go on. She didn't. Well, let's see. The animus is this primitive man, and just as the animus, kind of a one who doesn't have regularity. The girl leaves home, comes to a royal garden with the father said he'd take care of her. She says, I can't stay here. There's no way I can stay here. So she leaves home. She goes into the forest, and she's attended by an angel. She comes to a royal garden and is so hungry, she wants to eat some of the pears. Now she's eating pears. Eve ate apples. So this is very interesting. Now the gardener sees this, mentions it to the king, and he finds her, marries her, and gives her hands of silver, which are not natural hands. They lack spontaneity. So right now, what has happened is she's married to the king. And after she eats the pears, and he gives her hands of silver. So they're married, but there's no spontaneity yet. That has not happened yet. Her hands need to grow back. And so the story's not over. She has not freed herself from the animus yet, the negative animus. Now, remember, her father thought it was an apple tree he had sold to the devil. And now von Franz does this wonderful, this is a beautiful little interlude. It's the motif of the garden with the beautiful fruit that the king has, which invisible powers steal from. So the king represents this dominant content of collective consciousness, and it is the visible representation of collective unconsciousness, our consciousness. Yet it always risks the fact that it cannot express the totality of the self, only one or another aspect. And this is the same as ego. It can only express one or another aspect of the totality of the psyche. And life is so rich and continually changing that there needs to be greater flexibility in consciousness, enabled to express everything that's going on within, and consciousness cannot express all of this. So consciousness tends to be too narrow, stay too long on one track. And that is why we need dreams to keep us informed and adapted to the new conditions of life and to the totality of the psyche, really. The individual has to constantly adapt to the messages of the depths. And in the myth, the kings are often impotent, sickly, helpless, aged. They're not brilliant kings. And this represents the unadapted collective attitude, which is always going to run out. It's going to become the Senex aspect. Now, then she starts talking about the pear thief. Now, the pear thief is nature. It's a personification of an unconscious content that steals libido from consciousness. The pear thief. It comes into our ego garden and starts to steal our pears, the energy from us, because we are not living as we should. We need a message. Now, if you are depressed and you get up in the morning in a bad mood, everything tends to be boring and flat. Somebody or something is stealing your energy. Maybe you can't sleep. Well, why can't you sleep? Well, something is stealing your pears. And the primitive man said that the fat of his kidneys or his soul had been stolen, and he has to go to the shaman or to the unconscious to bring it back into himself. So now these losses of energy and interest mean that life is fading from the old unconscious, the old consciousness, the old way of doing things, and it's due to a complex in constellation of in consciousness that attracts the energy of the unconscious. The unlived life within us is going to come and steal our energy because we're not living the life that we need to. And the unconsciousness, now, the consciousness can do it by sending you dreams, and it can also do it by stealing your pears, stealing your energy. And so, she mentions that the conscious, it almost, this happens a lot. The consciousness feels bored and stale, but meanwhile, the unconscious is slowly becoming enriched and more vital because of our staleness in the outer world. So much as we become stale in the outer world, much life is accumulated below. It's about ready to burst. We become like a volcano that's about ready to burst. So when the feminine aspect, the anima, begins to damage or steal energy from consciousness, she mentioned, this is a really fun thing, image that she mentioned, a kind of sullen opposition in the collective unconscious that appears when our energy starts to be stolen. It's an atmosphere of an inertia that indirectly forces the man to change his attitude. Now, this usually, now here's the outer example of this. When a woman cannot make the evolution necessary to meet a situation, it becomes natural for her to adopt the feminine reaction of being nasty and sullen, spoiling man's pleasure by always saying no. No. He's bored, he's listless, he comes to the feminine for life, and she says no. Okay. Now, this ruins the atmosphere by this nasty passivity or nasty, I'm not going to participate, which, behind which stands the feminine's unconscious intention of forcing the man to change his outer attitude. She's going to be sullen and nasty until he says no. Now, here's a myth that Jung quotes about this. It's a Hopi myth. Okay, the Hopis originally lived deep in the earth. And every time a layer would be overcrowded, in other words, the ego consciousness had spent too much time there. Okay, it's the feminine aspect within the layer would become so intolerable to the conscious attitude or of the man, he would have to find a way to get up. He'd have to find a way to become more conscious. He had to go to the next layer where you hadn't lingered too long and it wasn't overcrowded. And then you'd go up there and you'd start a new life up there. And so the woman, through her nastiness and sullenness, forces the Hopi men into the world of consciousness. Now, this is a creation myth, really. It really is. And the aspect is here that the feminine aspect within any polarity is a growing thing. It always is growing. The masculine aspect tends to be a little static, even though it's very clever and it's directed thinking, it's static. And once it gets too, it's lingered there too long, the feminine realizes she's not going to put up with the fact that there's not this continual growth, and so she becomes nasty and sullen and starts to say no. So he has to, and behind that, you have to change your attitude. It's often a plea to the man. That here's the plea to the man: you have totally lost eros function. You are totally involved in the logos world, and I'm not putting up with it anymore. So then it forces the man to become more balanced. He has to return to the eros aspect of himself. So he's returning to nature. He's returning to the source of renewal, which is the anima. Hi, I think is it Monica? I can't read yeah. Hi, Monica. We're just getting to the good part here of this tale. I'm going to finish in about 20 minutes and then we'll start discussion. You can tell us a little bit about yourself, and so can Glenna and Margella. Anyway, now there's another form of catalyst of how eros causes growth in culture and civilization, and that is through becoming very demanding on the feeling side. And we kind of discussed that just a second ago. She didn't receive enough feeling when she was young. There's a psychological hunger for feeling. And remember, there are 4 functions. None of them are unimportant. We live in a world of the thinking function, which is devilish. It really is devilish. Okay. And so what's missing is with the unconscious aspect of the thinking function is the feeling function. And hey, what about sensation and intuition too? I mean, when you live in this world of that, it all has to do with the rational materialism, and the rational materialism, von Franz says, is the revenge of the father archetype, which is supposed to be about bringing meaning to unconscious contents. Well, the revenge of the father archetype is this logic, Mr. Spock type world. Now the revenge of the mother archetype, who is the one that took this bare rock that was earth before life and made it teem with greenness, is matter. That's her. So you live in a thinking world with rational materialism, and these are the things which in alchemy is called dissolve and coagulate. There's dissolving and coagulating forces at work here. So anyway, he mentions that the woman gives him reminders of her, that she needs, or that soul needs, attention and care, and this has a positive effect on the man's anima. Let's just talk a little about apples. I mean, and Parsifal and Prometheus here is pretty interesting. She says, now apples are now you can say the girl who steals from the garden of the animus king is also asking that he pay attention to her. He's stealing pear. Now, what's the difference between, we've had the apple tree, which the man thought he was going to sacrifice to get his mill to be turned by the water wheel. This is what Robert Johnson says really happened, is that the miller had to grind by just pushing the mill himself, and the devil gave him the water wheel to do it, which I think it makes a little more sense. Now, but he thought all he had to do was sacrifice nature, which was his apple tree in the backyard of his unconscious, okay, too. The unconscious is in the backyard. And if he cuts down his apple tree, he's going to get this machine that's going to allow him to cheat and do things cheaply. Now, but it's his soul that he's giving up to, that organizing aspect of consciousness that is cut off from life, the devil. Okay. Now, the pears are a feminine symbol. So it's this strange analogy to the Garden of Eden, where Eve was induced to steal fruit and give it to the man, but this feminine eats the pears of the man. And in Eden, it was not the angel, but the devil who gave it to Eve. And so this is kind of a change in consciousness. And listen to it. It's really a evolution. In Genesis, the apple stands for the knowledge of good and evil, which should make man equal to God. And to steal and eat the fruit would be to break into the realm of divine totality. And now the Promethean, and this is what Prometheus did when he stole the fire from Olympus. His sin was to go up beyond the natural unconsciousness of paradise. So there's a sin of wanting to become conscious, which is resented by nature. Now remember, the mother wants her son to become a hero and to marry the princess, but she also doesn't want him to leave her. And you can't have both. And so she's both, she has both aspects of not wanting him to leave her womb, and also for him to succeed. And is what's going to happen here. So the sin of wanting to become conscious is resented by nature. But if Eve had not eaten the fruit and given it to the and brought consciousness into the world, then God would not have become man. Christ would not have been born and lived as man or been crucified on the earth. That's the Christian myth anyway. And since this is the highest form of grace, all of this bringing of consciousness through eating the apple was a felix culpa, a fortunate sin, and with a favorable outcome. Now, that's one aspect of the story. Now let's hear the same story in a different fashion. In the Grail legend, the story is Parsifal of Parsifal stands in contrast to that of Adam. Parsifal will not transcend the taboo on gaining knowledge and asking about the grail vessel. That's his sin of not gaining knowledge, not asking the question. He needs a question answered. He won't ask it. So he's sinned. Now compare that with eating the tree of knowledge, where the sin was gaining knowledge that nature resented. So Parsifal asks neither about the king's wound nor of the service of the grail vessel, because he'd been told to ask was childish. Parsifal is called often the third Adam, and he's a contrast to Adam and Christ. That is actually real too. I mean, where do you think the Grail legend came from? Where do you think the Christ legend came from? Where do you think the Adam legend came from? They all came from the same author. Okay. It's the same author. Okay. Now, so Parsifal's sin is not asking the question, whereas Adam ventures into the realm of knowledge and ate the fruit. So there's been this slow transformation in the attitude of the unconscious towards consciousness. Now it is a sin not to become conscious. Before it was a sin to leave the unconscious, you know. So originally it felt like it was a sin to become conscious. Now it is a sin not to be conscious. So in a different form, she says often when people talk of depth psychology. Now this is really true of our world. And analysis, they say you shouldn't dig stuff like this up, all this myth and dream analysis and everything. Just follow your common sense. And if you just follow the general rule, that's enough. You know, if you want to know more than that, you're nuts. I mean, you're very odd and you're unusual, and it's not necessary. You know, I mean, but according to the Grail legend, to be unconscious is also a sin against nature. Okay, to remain conscious in the Adam legend, it was a sin to become conscious. Today, according to the Grail legend, it's a sin against nature to remain unconscious. So if you you're confronted with the paradox that it's a sin to become conscious and a sin to remain unconscious. So you can't remain in the state of innocence anymore. And she says it's a question of choice and attitude, which sin you prefer, to remain unconscious or to become conscious. Well, the one who says just stick to common sense and general rules, that's enough. That's the one that says don't become conscious. The second one is the one of Parsifal asking the question, you know, and which sin do you prefer? You know, is the one of depth psychology is Parsifal must ask the question. And that's what Jung said, that what gripped him was he wanted to understand. He wanted to be Parsifal. He wanted to ask the question. So this theft in the king's garden has a positive result because it draws the king's attention to the anima. He marries her and he gives her silver hands with which she can function halfway. And so we're going to talk a little bit about spontaneity. They lack spontaneity. So the king and the anima are married, but she has hands with no spontaneity. What does that mean? You know, so now what happens here? The king's away at war. The queen now has a baby. Letters are exchanged. Now, what happens is the devil sees another opportunity. Now he tried to steal the apple tree, but he really wanted this man's soul, his anima. Now he's interfering in the anima and the king's marriage life by intercepting these letters and trying. But it really is going to be a now what von Franz says too, that normally the stepmother does this. In this particular version, it's done by the devil, and the mother-in-law does it because of jealousy. So this girl, now it's going to be wonderful. Talk about this spontaneity. That what is lacking in marriage life is spontaneity. What is lacking in raising children is spontaneity. And what is lacking in our soul life, our life of depth psychology, is spontaneity. We all, and this is it, we're going to read too, right following this. We'll just spend one time period on it because it's pretty short, is Robert Johnson's story of the handless maiden. And his whole theme is silver-handedness. All these people he deals with in the outer world who are supposedly being say accommodating to us, but they're doing it through silver-handedness, which lacks spontaneity and humanity, really. Now, so if the girl marries and her wish to develop is not appeased, so she's married, but she still doesn't have hands. That's the bad thing. So to avoid animus possession. So she can't ever develop without hands. So somehow she has to get her hands back. So her secret longing was not to be married and not to be a mother, as that was part of it, but also it was to develop within herself, and that remains unfulfilled. So there's this unsatisfied restlessness and depression overcome her. So now that's why the devil or the animus reappears within the marriage situation. The negative father complex of the woman is confronted with the negative mother complex of the king, and that's going to actually lead to something, actually. So that if you marry a man with a mother complex, the mother-in-law always is interfering. And if the daughter-in-law is rather lame and passive, she's the one who decides what you're going to do at Christmas, what the baby needs. She steps into the vacuum. And she is generally, a young girl is able to defend herself against this. But if she also has to defend an inner area within herself, she's handless, she's silver-handed, then she will not have the energy or the ability to defend herself on the outside. So she can, if she does this, she often becomes a martyr because everyone takes advantage of such a woman. So, but this pattern has created a meaning, for unless she's persecuted by the mother-in-law or by the negative animus, she would never get her hands back, and she would have artificial hands until the end of her life. And this is the problem the whole story revolves around. And we'll get a little bit into this. We're going to have to finish some of this next time. But this aspect, she's going to bring up the aspect of the woman who marries a man not for love, but for and so she doesn't she lacks no spontaneity. Or the woman who has children just because, not because she loves children, but just because that's what people around her demand of her. That also lacks spontaneity, and so she's silver-handed, really. And so, von Franz says she feels a little guilty about it. She doesn't know what to do. So she buys all kinds of books on how to raise children properly, and she reads those, uh, you know, and she doesn't have good maternal instincts. She says a woman with a real maternal instinct, if she gets mad, she can shout at the children, but she never goes too far because her maternal, she never leaves the good maternal instincts. And also that a woman with really good maternal instincts, she says, um, most people are overwhelmed by doing diapers and keeping the place tidy, but someone who has a natural maternal instinct, say of the mother bear, you know, she's a mother bear. She can cope with it fine, you know. But anyway, we're going to finish now. What we're really going to get into next time, there's going to be a little bit about this, but then we're also going to get into the real magical aspect. Well, it's kind of, I wished we could get it to it this time, but we're not going to have time. But the next session is going to be the most magical side of this strange, but really is just so richly symbolic story. By the way, I think we've got Gary from 11:45 until, or from the quarter till the hour. Else, let's put it that way. We'll have a recorded discussion, and then at the top of the hour, we'll have the rest of it will be unrecorded. We'll just go on until everybody gets done talking, really. So we don't have to go to 12:30. But Gary's Overguard here is going to moderate the discussion and just go around to each person, and you can either comment on this, or if you have anything else you want to discuss, feel free to do it, because this is the time to do it. So Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually I wanted to start off by asking what you said about spontaneity. What the soul lacks is spontaneity, and that's also true in, like, I think you said, in raising children. That is generally what is lacked. I was wondering if you might go in a little more depth in that.
Yeah, well, if you have children not because you love children, and you get married not because you love the man, but because society demands you do it, and this isn't really what you want to do, and you don't have the let's say, and we're going to talk about the fact that this woman is handless. Okay, so you get married handless, you have children handless, you need hands. And so what you're lacking, and this is what Marion Woodman said she lacked, was the feeling function. She was too silver-handed, so she lacked the maternal instinct, she lacked the instinct to relate to her husband. So she was, and von Franz has this wonderful little comment that you can't have a real relationship with anyone just through goodwill. That's not the relatedness. Just through being showing goodwill to someone, she says that's silver-handedness. And we're gonna find out how we get out of silver-handedness. But if you have silver hands, you have to have living hands. Now we talked about, here's spontaneity, okay, and Azine brought this up last time. It's at the end of the story. It's the Russian version of how she gets her hands back. She's no hands. She's holding the baby. She wants a drink of water. She leans over, and the baby drops in the water. And there's this old man standing by there, and she doesn't know what to do. And he says, "Pull him out." And she says, "I can't. I don't have any hands." And he doesn't accept that for an answer. He says, "Pull him out." And so then she reaches in, and her hands go back. And now she has living hands. That's spontaneity. And she pulls him out. So where's her silver-handedness then? And you know, Robert Johnson mentions he was always dealing with these very silver-handed waiters, but she said that he said that there was this one Irish boy who came, and he was too genuine to be silver-handed, you know, and so you know, even though he'd been trained, he had so much spontaneity that they lost. There was no humanity lost in their relatingness, even though he's in the restaurant and he's the waiter. But we'll go into it a little bit more later, but it is a kind of a long process of going through that aspect. And what is the point of it? There is a point, and that's leads into the aspect of going, returning to the source to get our living hands again.
Yeah, it's
how do we get our
interesting
living hands back?
because they use the, you know, the literal, or I guess a symbol, you know, the lack of hands or the silver hands for the lack of the feeling function. It's like, you know, it's
Just faking it.
yeah.
That's
yeah.
not spontaneous.
But
I
it's
don't
also
have a living feeling function. My living feeling function is all persona, you know, it's all outer shell, outer surface. There's nothing spontaneous about it.
But, you know, I think it also kind of reminds me of like the, you know, the dream work that we do, where, you know, you have to turn these symbols back into meaning. And, you know, and initially you're like, well, what does the silver hand mean? You know, or what do the lack of hands mean? You know, but yeah, great. Thank you. Zen, would you like to go next?
Sorry, I was writing something. Yeah, it was very interesting. I don't know how Greg know my mother. She's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, initially, my father and my mother, they were a very good match, but because it wasn't initiated by love, and it was initiated by traditional way of marrying. In Iran, my mother has always had this resistance, you know, and there's a lot of things that I can just find parallels with their lives. Like she's always saying no to everything, every project, everything that my father wanted to do in his life to improve his life. My mother was stopping it, and it's interesting. That she always, it took me a lifetime to understand that her resistance to my lifestyle, which I was, most of my life, I was living single, I was a writer, I was traveling, a very independent lifestyle. And my mother hated it. She always said, tradition is good, you have to get married. Get married. And it took me years and years to understand that she actually wanted this life, but she was too afraid to fight the tradition, the structure around her. My life was what she wanted to do, but she never had the courage to break the rules, you know. And in her youth, she was secretly, she was sending stories to the magazines, and she had these dreams, and she has this craving for love, intense love and emotions. And my father, of course, he wasn't giving it to her. And I was thinking about when my father betrayed, because you said there's a betrayal on the father's side, okay? My father grew up in a village, and he had to travel miles and miles every day to get to school. In fourth grade, the village, the nearby villages, they didn't even have the fourth grade. So he and some of his little friends, they came to a small city and they started living independent. kids just to have access to school. So the betrayal was forgetting the nature and the villager's life and going into study, and later he became a professor in university. So the technology in his life was this part. I mean, giving up the nature and feeling, intuition, spontaneity, and just dedicating his life to structure and knowledge and stuff like that. It's really interesting, and I have to think more about the state of silver-handedness. It's really interesting that how you are functioning but not functioning. You're doing something but you're not doing. One thing I can tell about myself is that when I was accepted to dentistry school, I was also accepted to art school. I'm really an artist. I was in the whole country, I was among the first 10 people. So very high grade in art, okay? But I chose dentistry because I had done some, I was political and I got imprisoned because of being political. Now I wanted to succumb to templates and be good for my parents. And of course, it wasn't a good idea. I studied dentistry, I practiced dentistry, but eventually I quit, okay? I quit, but every time I remember when I was going to my practice, waiting for the patients, every day I would go there, show up, but I was praying, please, something happens and no patients show up today. You know, you're doing something, but you're not actually doing, you're just doing it to say to everybody, I'm doing it. Listen, I have hands, right? But my heart was never there. And it's really, there's so many parallels. I'm so overwhelmed by all this. It's really interesting. Thank you.
I mean, that's so fascinating, the parallels between, you know, what Craig was talking about, where your father was completely locked into the logos, and, you know, and your mother, who wanted to live the life that you were living, you know, responded with the opinionated negative animus that always said no. I mean, it just matches it to a T, you know, it's just like, oh my gosh.
Joseph, go ahead.
She holds us responsible, me and my sister. Like it took us a long time to figure out in our family and talk about it. That we were just innocent kids. We were not burdens. We were not trying to stop you from the life you wanted. But we were the target of her anger and hatred. She also had children because she had to. It was a template. You know, she was following the template, but she never wanted to be a mother.
Oh, so here's, I guess, the other question is, so did the constant saying of no drive your father to Eros, to the feeling function?
No, completely passive, completely passive.
Yeah.
And disconnected from life, from reality, from feelings. And it's really interesting. I can't go there because it will take a lot of time. But these two aspects of anima and animus, like animus, because it's about talking, it's just this part that the negative animus, like in Bluebird, that's it. Yeah, there. It says, don't go to that room. Don't open that room. Don't see that. Don't try to know something. You know, But for women, for the negative animal, it's more like don't tell. Keep it to yourself. Don't express yourself. Don't talk. Because what's the point? Even if you talk to people, they won't understand. It's pointless to express your feelings, right? So these two aspects of negative animal and negative animus, like my father, he's a very silent man. You can sit beside him for hours and he doesn't say a word. Yeah, and my mother constantly talks. It's so funny, interesting.
Wow.
You,
Well,
you-
thank
you know, I
you.
want to say one thing this whole is bringing up to me is almost all of Joseph Campbell's work is about this fairy tale, and so with the wasteland motif of living an inauthentic life. So silver-handedness really means to live disconnected from the water of life. You know, you're living in a realm of dry stones. This is silver-handedness, is this inauthentic life. So there's an aspect of this tale that is very similar to the wasteland and to the Grail legend. Is and it's this modern disease of not living authentically. You know, living
Soulless.
yes, soulless, silver-handed existence. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, Tim, would you like to go next?
Well, sure. I think this is this material is right on, but I kind of don't want to take any time because we have so many women here, and I really want to hear what the women's perspective is. But I did want to share a piece of art that I did about, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago called The Handless Maiden. And I've been trying to remember what the impetus for this was. I was doing some collaborations with a couple of other artists, a poet and a paper maker.
She and her redness are imprisoned in a box and surrounded by calculations, you know, and straight lines and geometrical forms. Beautiful.
Yeah, so this really strikes me as more the collective disease that the whole society suffers from, the handlessness of the culture at large. Anyway, I just wanted to share that, and I'm eager to hear what the women in the group have to say about all this.
Wow, beautiful.
I was trying to unmute myself there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you muted me there. Talk about a piece of talk about a piece of art that represents it. That was great. Monica, do you have a comment?
Just before you begin, Monica, I'm going to turn the recording off so that we turn it off at noon, so that you know, it's just a little. Anybody can say anything they want here.